To the Boca Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz. It feels a little bit like a Monday in that we had all kinds of technical, logistical issues to try to sort through, and we're crossing our fingers. I think we got it all figured out. So my apologies for the slight delay, but this is going to be a really great conversation here. And return guest, actually, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. For those of you that are live streaming, don't be shy. Join in the conversation today. Ask questions. You can comment. Would love for you to be part of the conversation. And for those of you that are listening to the audio version of the fact, or after the fact, I should say, make sure to follow us at Boca Podcast, BOKEH Podcast on Instagram. We announce on the weekly the upcoming live streams, and you can plan those, schedule those in your calendar, and come join us to be part of the conversation. I hope you will do that. All right. I am bringing back Sean. Sean, you know what? It's been a little while since I've said your last name out loud. Oblizalo, is that correct?
That was great.
Okay, perfect. All right. We made it happen. Overcome the tech issues, pronounce your last name correctly. I think we're off to a good start.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for coming back. And you know what? I normally write down the episode number that I've had a previous guest on before. It's not a lot of them, by the way. So you're special guest getting to come back second multiple times, doing multiple shows here on the Boca Podcast. And for those of you that may be curious, you can just do a quick search, or we'll link to the original episode in the show notes at bocapodcast.com. Sean, for those that may not know who you are, didn't hear the first episode, will you do me a favor and just kind of introduce yourself and your brand briefly, if you will?
Yeah, so my name is Sean Oblizalo, obviously. So I'm a adventure elopement photographer in Colorado. I also work in Yosemite sometimes. So yeah, I mean, this is going into my fourth year of just doing elopements. The pandemic kind of helped push me off the ground, and then it's just been like kind of a rocket ship ever since.
Well, and I have to say, this is a little bit of a tangent. We didn't even talk about this ahead of time, but you sent me a link, I think when we were prepping for the interview, and I'm going to pull it up here on the website. So for anybody listening in, first of all, vowsandpeaks.com, just like it sounds. We'll link to it in the show notes at bocapodcast.com. And I'll go ahead and mention as well Sean's Instagram, vows_and_peaks on Instagram. Make sure you go check out his work. And Sean, I got to give you props. Yet again, your work is truly stunning. I see a lot of photography, really, really beautiful stuff. But the thing that I want to give you even more props for is the link that you sent me to originally, which is, it's almost like a landing page specifically for couples that are looking for elopement photography in Colorado. I have to highlight this because I'm kind of blown away, actually. I'm curious how long it took you to put this together, and then the thought process behind it, because this is maybe the longest landing page on a wedding photography website that I've ever seen. And that's actually a compliment, by the way. The amount of detail is just mind-blowing here. So can you comment on the intention behind this? Because I think a lot of photographers could take this as a point of reference.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, okay, so I have to give like a shout out. Like when I first started doing this business, I was like built a website, and then I was like, oh, like, you know, you build a website and you're like, oh, what the hell do I do now? It's like,
right.
So I have this website, but how do you like get people to book? And then that's when I learned about SEO. And then, so when I learned about SEO, like I signed up for this, I think I've mentioned before, Fueler of Photos in the past. So this is like 4 years ago. And one of the guys told me, he's like, you know, you're going to have a really hard time ranking for like the obvious term of like Colorado elopement photographer. Because like when you're learning SEO, the first thing you think of is like, okay, I'm going to rank for the thing that I think people are searching for the most. So he was like, you got to create a guide about best places to elope in Colorado, and then you could rank faster. So I did this page, and it took like 8 months to start ranking in the first page. Then I just started adding on to it every year. Like it evolved more and more and more. And so like this is kind of just like my final, like, you know, my Mona Lisa of like, you know, blog pages. Like it's just like it ranks well for a lot of different key terms and like long tail keywords. And so it's just, and then a lot of it's just like stuff I've experienced, my passions, but living in Colorado for 10 years, I just kind of like, hey, this is my knowledge, I'm going to throw it in there. And so it's just evolved to this.
I was super impressed, man. And it's taken me longer than it should have, honestly, to begin to learn more of the inner workings of SEO. And I guess with that context, not only the additional context, but also the additional effort that we put into SEO and our brand, I'm just so impressed by this page. I mean, it's really, really
Thank you.
impressive. And, you know, a lot of times when you go to like a sales page or a landing page, you opt into something and you get sent to this page, it feels kind of sleazy and like information that's probably irrelevant and not actually that valuable necessarily. But when I look at this page, and for those of you who are not live streaming, you need to go check it out. If you just go to vowsandpeaks.com/best place to elope Colorado, and there are dashes in between each of those words. We'll link to it in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com as well. But I'm just scrolling kind of endlessly. But again, I say that as the biggest compliment possible. It's just so impressive, the amount of content that you've put together that is very, very specific to the various locations that I'm assuming you enjoyed photographing and, of course, are also popular to photograph at in Colorado.
Yeah.
Relevant information, images to highlight the particular location. I mean, it's just really, really, and I've already been scrolling now as I'm talking for the last 15, 20 seconds. I'm only like halfway down this page. It is absolutely mind-blowing. So major props to you for that. I'm super impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just been cool to like kind of see it just evolve, and like now it's like I'm just like, all right, I'm really proud of it, because it really is like, it's not like I had some people help me write it, but I gave them the information.
Sure.
To, like, you know, because I can't write it, so it's like, it's not like one of those blogs where like you send it off to someone to write you a blog and then like it's not your words, it's not like even your expertise. Like everything in there is like from me.
Sure. Well, even if it's not, I mean, the idea of delegating some work like that, especially, I mean, I can only imagine, how long did it take to actually get that complete page done, would you say?
Well, I mean, I started like 4 years ago, and like the first time I had it, it was like literally like 5 locations, and then like as I've kind of grown more and more, like and shot in more locations, it's like, you know, you kind of start filling it in more, but then you start adding in like, just like I did a video last year, like where I basically did a video walking through like my favorite places, and I added like what's the weather like, how to get around Colorado. So you just kind of get it to evolve, and so it's been about 4 years.
Well, it's impressive. What I was getting at, though, is the amount of time that you would have to put into that if you did it all yourself is kind of mind-boggling to consider, because it then takes you away from running the other aspects of your business as well. So I don't think it's a bad thing to hire somebody, or multiple people for that matter, to come alongside and help. And I think it's great that you did that. And then for those of you that are listening and that missed out, we actually had the guys from Fuel Your Photos on the show, and I'm going to pull this up on the browser here. Corey Potter and Dylan Howell back in episode 432, SEO for Photographers. And we've actually had the opportunity since then to work with Corey in particular. And I just, man, super, super impressed with these guys. I mean, the technical know-how is really impressive. And, you know, it's funny, Sean. I mean, SEO is one of those topics where if you go do a Google search, for example, you're going to find thousands and thousands and thousands of websites and services that are trying to help, quote unquote, help you with your SEO, but you never quite know if these people actually know what they're doing or if you're going to actually get results from it. And I have to say that I'm super impressed with these guys. So if you all listening in or watching want to learn more about SEO and want to improve that, especially looking at Sean's site here, make sure to go check out episode 432, SEO for Photographers with Corey Potter and Dylan Howell. We'll link to that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. All right. So thanks for letting me take that little tangent, Sean, because again, major props, super impressed. But we're here actually to talk about how to photograph a first look today. And I left the elopement part of it out. I know that you specialize in elopement, but in the title, I just said how to photograph a first look. And the reason is because I think the principles that you're going to be talking about here are applicable not just to elopement photography. Would you say?
I would definitely say so. Yeah, like it's going to be a direct correlation to like any kind of first look. And I would say like in traditional weddings, and then all-inclusive weddings and elopements as well. So it doesn't matter, like, you know, like your race, your age, like your sex, doesn't matter. Like this is applicable to like every single kind of thing that is going to require like a first look at an elopement or a wedding. Okay,
cool. Well, in preparation for this conversation, you sent ahead of time 4 different ideas, kind of elements that make up your approach to photographing a first look at a wedding. One is choosing a location. Second is timing. Third is positioning the couple. And then fourth is preparing a reaction. So let's actually just jump into it. And I know you're going to share your screen for some of this too, just to give some examples, but let's talk about choosing a location first. And I know you told me ahead of time, you've got kind of one main idea that drives your choice of location. Will you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so it was funny. Like I was telling my parents in law last night that I was doing this podcast, and then, one thing like my father-in-law brought up was like, like how do you like focus on the couple without like having the landscape take over them? And I told him, I was like, honestly, that this is something that people really like about my work is like I really kind of put them in the middle of a landscape. So I also told him like, one of the things that people kind of get focused on when they go to a different location for like elopements is like, we're going to fixate on like this alpine lake that we're going to get married at. But like in reality, like you have to be creative and taking in the other parts of the landscape as well that like you can highlight. So one of my main goals when I'm doing a first look at a location is like, I'm trying to do a different first look backdrop than I'm going to be doing for the vow ceremony and then like the other photos. So it's like you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into like shooting at the exact same spot for the whole time. You want to be like, okay, what else looks tight here? Like what else could like really look really cool? What has good lighting? So you're going to one spot for something specific, but you want to be able to open your mind to like the surroundings.
That makes sense. And I like that too. I mean, if for no other reason than just variety's sake, right? If somebody gets their pictures back and they're looking at it and everything is just with kind of the same backdrop in the background. I mean, to be clear, I'm super jealous of where you get to photograph. And for those of you that aren't following Sean already, if you just jump over to his Instagram, and again, if you missed this at the beginning, vows_and_peaks on Instagram. But I'm just pulling, this first, here's actually a first look, I believe. And just looking at the background that you're getting to photograph in here is stunning. So I would venture that most couples probably wouldn't complain too much, but I like that you're going the extra mile, making the extra effort to create something that is super, that incorporates variety despite the amazing location, right? Or really ultimately to take advantage of the amazing location. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and like that just goes with anytime I'm out hiking in general. It's like sometimes you kind of go to like a spot where like, okay, I'm gonna go up here, get a cool sunset photo, and then you turn to your left and like just the sky's exploding somewhere else where you're like, oh, like that's actually even cooler than what I came here for. And so sometimes like that kind of happens for elopements too. And the exciting part is like when the couple has no idea that there's other cool shit around them that they're gonna just like look really cool in.
Yeah. Well, there's a fun, interesting correlation, and we won't go too deep on this, but to life too. Like that notion of certainly in business, but then also just in life in general, the idea of kind of keeping our minds and our eyes open. It's so easy in life and business to kind of put blinders on. We get some idea in our head. I mean, I'm guilty of this a million times over. We get some idea in our head about what something should be, or we plan in advance, which isn't, of course, altogether a bad idea, but we get so fixated on the idea that it takes away from other potential opportunities because our eyes aren't open, our minds aren't open. So I love this principle just as a general concept, but certainly when it comes to photographing an elopement. Okay, so leveraging then the variety of opportunities visually, specifically for this first look, making sure that we're incorporating some variety, looking for a different location than maybe the ceremony location or maybe even the portrait location. We're starting with that as far as the location goes. Let's go ahead and jump then to timing. And this is a big one too, because I mean, I'm sure that I know that the vibe is different when it's an elopement and maybe just you and the couple, or you, the couple, and a couple of other people, than a wedding photographer who's dealing with a massive wedding party and a bunch of guests and that kind of thing. But timing at the end of the day as a wedding photographer is literally everything. I think back to, speaking of actually, when I photographed my first wedding, this is like 2001, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had read because back then you'd read books about photography. So I got some wedding photography books and portrait photography books. I'm looking at technique and framing and shooting style and so forth. And I go to photograph this first wedding, and I'm photographing the ceremony. It's an indoor ceremony, and I missed the kiss. And that's like the ultimate worst experience, right? When it comes to this idea of timing, like you're not prepared. And I was using a consumer level film camera at the time, so it wasn't super quick either. And I totally missed the kiss. And fortunately it worked out. The couple was super gracious. We set the shot back up, did it, and it was fine in the end. But timing is everything. And especially when it comes to
Totally.
something like a first look, because then if you have to do it over, it kind of kills the vibe and kills the mood and kills maybe the potential quality of the images. So what
Yeah.
are kind of the two big ideas that drive your approach to timing when it comes to photographing the first look?
Yeah. So, I mean, just in general, I like to bake in extra time on my timeline. So, like, for example, like when I go hiking, like I'm a 20-minute, a mile hiker. So like when I go hiking on elopements, it's like, the goal isn't to kill us. It's like just to kind of get up there at a gradual pace where everybody's happy. So it's like, I try to bake in like, we're taking an extra 20 minutes to get up there in general. So like, that's just a general rule of thumb I always use on like my timelines. Is like, hey, we're going to bake in time. And if we have to kick it up there and just like hang out under the stars, like that happens a lot. And I would much rather have that happen than anybody to feel anxious to like getting rushed, because the last thing people want to do is feel anxious to be chasing light.
So true.
And I know that like when I do stuff outside, like my whole focus is going to be about like getting sunrise and good lighting. So this might be not be applicable to everybody, but I think like the understanding of like not making people feel rushed is super important. And like on this day, especially because the magnitude is so big, this is gonna be something they're always gonna remember.
Well, and not to try to go too deep today, but I mean, it's another great reminder for just life in general. Like I've been super intentional. I'm 43 now, so as I'm getting a little bit older, I'm being more intentional when it comes to building in that cushion that you're talking about in my life. Certainly when it comes to work as well, with certain instances that are relatively high pressure as they are, like just on their own. The idea that we're then we're trying to do too much at the last minute, that we don't build that cushion in, adds stress.
Yeah.
And life is just not as enjoyable when you're in that like high pressure, rushing around, stressful mode. So it's a good reminder in general, but especially as it relates to these situations, because a lot of times we're photographing elopement, again, maybe a little bit different, because I'm assuming you at least know the couple a little bit at this point, but in a many wedding scenarios for photographers, they're meeting a couple maybe for the first time, or if they did an engagement session, maybe it was brief, they don't know them that well. So the idea that you then layer on top of that unfamiliarity a certain level of rushing and ultimately stress, that is not going to help the relationship, and it's certainly not going to help the photographs.
No, definitely not. And it's just nice to like be able to take your time, because like some of my favorite photos are like of just people getting ready for the first look, and I think those are like super cool. It's just like it's like a very nice way of storytelling, of like being able to like have a chapter for everything throughout the whole day. So like I kind of look at it as like, you remember like as a kid where you had those books and you'd flip the pages and it would like turn into like a moving comic strip or something? Like,
little paper strip things.
Yeah, and you flip the book and it goes zzz, and it tells a story, like at each page. So like that's kind of how I feel about like elopements. It's like I want to be able to take my dial on my camera and just like scroll it, where it's just like a giant storytelling where it's like front to back. You're like, okay, that's what happened. So so I like to have like those moments in there. But then like as far as like the next part of timing, like I like to kind of vet people on the way up. So like I kind of like tell people like, hey, just for example, if we're using like a guy and girl, so like I would ask the guy like, hey, do you have a suit? Like how many pieces is your suit? Like do you have a tie? Like all these kind of things, because a lot of people think that generally the brides get dressed faster, but like that's really not the case, because they just have usually one thing to kind of throw up. So it's like I just tell people like, have him get ready first. You can start your makeup, and then I'll get him set up, and then also just trying to keep like the bride warm during like an early morning is super important too. So you just got to take like your timing is not only do you want to make sure it's like seamless, but you want to make sure it's just like comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, I love that actually, that summation of it. Comfortable. Absolutely. Because it would be very easy, but then also of course simplistic to just think, oh, we need to be up here at, let's say, whatever the sunrise time is, for example. We need to be up there by that particular time. And that's all we're fixating on that one time frame while not considering everything else that's going on, all the other moving parts. So yeah, to your point, one, build in cushion, just generally speaking. And one of the ways that we can do that is then your second point, which is to kind of vet the couple's timing, what it is that they need to get done before the actual photography begins, so that you're kind of building that into the experience. You've had that conversation, you're managing their expectations, they're naturally managing your expectations as well. And then the timing is a lot more easy to manage at that point.
Totally. And it's just like they're paying you for like your expertise. It's like they don't want to go up there and like start like, like having to ask questions. They want you to just be like, hey, like what do I need to do to like look really cool and have a really awesome moment? So like, do you care if I like kind of share this screen real quick?
No, please do.
Cool. So like this is like a cool like fun example like where it's they're kind of getting ready and you can kind of see like the timing wise like you're kind of getting like those are just some sneak peeks, but like you see all these moments where they're kind of hiking up, and then you see them getting ready and like see what I mean about like how sick these all look, like these photos of like them like getting ready like.
Yeah, Sean, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What we're seeing right now is thumbnails. Do you have a separate window open by any chance?
I do. Okay. Hold on. All right, let me. I didn't realize. Okay, let me do this. Okay, that better?
Unfortunately, we're still seeing
Oh no, it's opening a tab. I see what's happening here. All right, let me.
If you go to that, if you go to that tab, is there maybe we would see the thumbnail?
We'll see. Like when I open it, it's opening a whole new tab.
So if you then click on that tab, would we see that there?
I'm clicking on it.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, right now we're just seeing the thumbnails. Well, even smaller now, but we're just seeing thumbnails.
I think I can do it this way. This will do.
There we go.
Okay.
Awesome.
So you can kind of see like what I mean about like just like these kind of getting ready photos.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like these are some of the best ones because like it's just really fun to kind of tell the story.
Mm.
And then you kind of get to like the like this part right here. But like see like what I mean about like all these cool colors and like
incredible.
Like telling a story and like stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I just think about some of the locations. I mean, I photographed hundreds of weddings over, a decade or so. And I just think about some of the locations that I photographed in. I would just die to have something like this to photograph it getting ready with this kind of scenery. It's absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, see
wow.
But see how the variety's been different every single time.
That's incredible.
Like, but that goes back to like the location stuff, it's like, and then you just kind of like, this is like really cool because now you're getting to the first look. And then this will bring us like the next sequence and stuff like that too. But.
Well, yeah. So let's actually kind of talk about, I mean, this is a really great segue. Let's talk a little bit about positioning if you can. And maybe we can continue to use those same images you were just sharing. But I'd love for you to give a little bit of context behind how you position couples. You mentioned to me ahead of time, I think you've got a couple of ideas that drive this. Will you talk about those as you're sharing some examples?
Yeah. So like for one, like I never really care about like what kind of lighting I'm shooting into. So I'll shoot into direct light, I'll shoot into backlight. So for me, like that's something like a lot of photographers might get scared about. But I kind of embrace it. So as far as positioning goes, like the general thing I traditionally do is I'll have like, let me see this again. I'll have the groom get ready. Like I'll put him in a different spot first while the bride gets ready. So like for this one example, like you can kind of see him on the like way out there.
Wow.
So the positioning I'm having is having him like always turned away from them, so like they can be ready for it. So the positioning is really important because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have the bride be directly behind him, because if he turns around, you're only going to see her back. Like
yeah,
you're not.
True.
So I have her come off to the side, either to the left or to the right, kind of stop. And you can kind of see like how she's off to the side. Then I have her lean in and tap him, because at that point the angle is like kind of turned sideways. He'll turn this way.
Yeah, and then you're actually able to see the full expression and response. Yeah.
Exactly. So like that was something I learned like in my first year is like, I had like one, I was like, I just missed the first look because I was directly behind them and she just walked up directly behind him.
And by the way, for everybody, I know that for the audio version of this podcast, you all are missing out quite a bit. So I just want to throw this out there. Make sure that you go to either facebook.com/Bokeh, BOKEH podcast, or youtube.com/Bokeh podcast so that you can see the visuals that we're actually discussing here. So Sean, what would be then, how would you sum up then the first idea behind positioning?
Yeah, so I would say like just the easiest way to say it is like to have the one person facing the opposite direction and then the other person kind of walk down. Like I kind of say like it's like a makeshift aisle. So walk down, you can kind of follow them as they go and have that person pull off, or like the bride pull off to the left or pull off to the right, and not directly behind them, and then tap in so then the groom can turn around and you can catch the reaction of him for the first time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm kind of frantically taking notes as we're talking here. This is good. So one, starting with facing opposite direction, obviously, so that gives everyone time. You're not rushing to try to capture the thing and he's seeing her or he's seeing him or whatever the scenario, whatever couple, they're seeing each other ahead of that moment, right? Because the closer they get to each other and then you actually get to see the interaction, that's the key. That's what you're trying to ultimately capture. So obviously facing the opposite direction, but then pulling off to the side. And I guess, feel free to continue here if you've got any other significant points you want to share about positioning, but I also have a question about this if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, okay, so I will say like what I usually do is I do like a reenactment of what I want them to do. So like it's kind of weird, but like I will just have them stand back and I'm like, okay, this is how I kind of want you to walk.
Okay.
And then I'll give them like an idea.
Sure.
And just like tap in. So it's like it's super easy. And again, this is applicable to like, any like couple at all. So like you could do this with like 2 guys, 2 girls, whatever you want to do.
Well, so this is where my question then I think is a good segue into this question, which is, as much as you're setting this up, and we're going to talk about this a little bit when it comes to emotion as well and capturing that expression, the responses between the two. How do you avoid setting it up too much? Like, and this is what comes to mind, maybe seem a little bit odd. Maybe you've experienced this, but when I've worked with videographers, as a photographer, I was as much a kind of photojournalist as possible. We would certainly set up shots specifically for portraits, maybe give a little bit of direction for the first look, but otherwise I didn't. The last thing that I wanted to do was to get in the way of a genuine, it's the cliche word I know, but genuine moment, like one that's actually happening naturally, where what they're doing feels natural for them. Their expressions and response is ultimately natural for them. So we can talk about emotional response here in just a second, but specifically with positioning, and you're talking about guiding them, like giving them an example of how to go about this. How do you do that without it then becoming kind of stiff and robotic on their part?
Well, I think I think people are looking for guidance on this part, and I think because I mean, I don't want to say like a lot of people don't know about first looks, but like maybe just people just don't really like understand like a first look. They're not like really like kind of like anticipating it or like really stoked on it. Like, and that kind of jumps ahead to the next part with like getting emotional reactions out of stuff.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
But like, cause I mean, as men, like sometimes we really don't read into the magnitude of something that maybe a woman might like be really hyped for. So, and
sure.
And I can so this goes back to like 4 years ago. The reason the first look became so important to me and why I knew I needed to kind of make this be different is because like 4 years ago I had a first look and then the groom had no reaction. He just basically said like, do you know where my belt is at? And then at that point I was like, that was probably the worst reaction you could have ever given.
That was his response when he saw her?
Yeah, I was like, well, do you know where my belt is at? And so that's when I knew like I needed to change this all. And I was like, all right, I need to make this like a moment, because in reality, like this is going to be the day that like a woman feels the most beautiful in her whole entire life. Like she'll never be able to like recapture like that feeling that she feels on her wedding day, like in her wedding dress, like it's such a big moment for them. And so as men, like sometimes we can just kind of overlook that. And so like being able to like tell someone that like, this is a big moment and like your reaction is going to be like rocket fuel. So like when you give her that reaction is going to be the way that she feels and that will be so uplifting to her. So and a lot of times when I tell people like this stuff verbatim, like that's when they start like kind of tearing up and crying, and then like
Really?
the light bulb kind of goes off. They're like, oh, like shit, like yeah, this
Wow.
is big. Like it's, and I swear, like I would say like probably half the guys I kind of give like this little spiel to is like, like this is important. It's gonna be like your reaction is gonna be a lot. Like they start to realize like, oh, like, and they start
That's
to
really
tear
cool.
up and like, yeah. So
I wouldn't have
it's,
expected that. That's really neat.
yeah, and so like it's just one of those things because like it really is like it's they go through all this trouble like get this really amazing wedding dress and like it's like such a big moment, and they want to just feel that way.
Well, so we're like you said, we kind of naturally moved on to this fourth point here about preparing reaction, and I know we're kind of focused on, shall we say, the stereotypical guy, maybe emotionless guy in some cases, who, as you said, may also not realize the significance of the moment. So you're preparing the reaction, and I love that you're getting such great natural results from these conversations. But can you give us an idea of what that conversation specifically sounds like? Like what is the interaction? What are the things that you're actually saying to them that is helping them? I mean, I understand, generally speaking, encouraging them to realize the significance of this, but I don't know, like, especially if I'm thinking about, again, you're kind of stereotypical guy who doesn't maybe realize the significance of what's going on here. And you start to talk to somebody like that. I don't know if the conversation would be stilted or to be like, what are you talking about? Or like, I'm just curious what it sounds like.
No, I mean honestly, like just this is what I go up to him. Like I put him in position first, and then she starts getting ready. And like the reason I kind of like do this conversation while she's getting ready is because like I want her to have her privacy too. So it's like I just tell him like, hey, like when you're good, just let me know.
Okay.
So I'll have that conversation with him, and I'm just like, hey, like this is a first look. This is like probably my favorite, most exciting part of like the whole day. Like there's a ton of anticipation, a lot of excitement. And then like after this, it's gonna be all cruise control because like this is the big reveal. So I just say like also this is the day that she feels the most beautiful in her whole entire life. So like your reaction right now is gonna be like rocket fuel for her. So like all you got to do is like take the moment in for yourself. Don't worry about me back here, but like make her feel the way that she feels right now today. So what you can do is like you can take her in for a big hug, give her a kiss. If you want to give her a twirl, you can do that. You can give her like a walk around, but like don't worry about me. This is you. And then I give him like a fist bump and I say rocket fuel. And then I
Rocket fuel.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take this and make it even more tangible. I'm clicking back over to that picture that you've got pulled up in the gallery, and let me actually click over. There we go. So do you remember the conversation with this particular groom and what the interaction ended up being like?
Oh yeah, well, dude, it was hella funny because like this day was insane. Like it it rained for like literally like 3 hours. We were hanging out in coffee shops, hanging out in Jeeps. So like there really was like tons of anticipation for this thing.
Wow.
Like it was just like a huge buildup.
Okay.
But like she had a hair and makeup gal with her that day that was doing stuff on spot. So when I got him set up, like
well, yeah, actually, do me a favor, Sean. As you're talking about it, will you kind of scroll back to like earlier on in the sequence and just kind of talk us through the whole thing? Because I love this. I'm already getting the sense of the story and what's going on. Talk us through it.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I think this is like our third or fourth location at this point, and then I finally was just like, all right, like I know where we're going. Like we're gonna go up here. There's gonna be a little window break. So I see how he's getting ready first. And I tell like, I mean, these are all moments where I'm like, he probably could do his suspenders by himself, but like they look really cute, like when you kind of get these.
Now, is that the bride that was helping him there?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of you that are just listening to the audio version of this, we've got the groom is starting to get ready. The bride is not in her dress, so she's helping him. It looks like put a tie on or just get the suspenders set up. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it was funny because so I always have him like kind of put like help him put stuff on just because I think it's like really cute for photos. But then you can kind of see him like way down here And I set him up like hella far away because I'm like, all right, I want to get down like pretty close so I can get like a big wide ass shot on this.
Which is amazing. And again, for those of you that are just listening, we've got this stunning wide angle shot. So the groom's on a kind of standing on a hill at the very bottom of the image. You've got these evergreens kind of just above him and around him, and then the mountains in the background, gorgeous fog. I mean, it's a really cool shot.
Yeah, it's sick. And like so like this is where I'm like kind of starting to follow her down, and like, you know, I'm just like capturing photos of her walking down and stuff like that.
And she's walking with an umbrella. You said it had been raining too?
Oh my dude, it was dumping buckets. It just would not like it would not excuse my language, it would not fuck off. It was just for like 6 hours just rain and just so. But I had him set down there for like 15 minutes, and then like usually it's not that long of a wait, but like just like she was kind of getting some freshening up, so like I'm like, dude, like you were just like, he was like, I was just stuck out there in my thoughts, no phone, nothing. I'm like, and then like he's like, then I started crying more. It was like
I was
like,
gonna
oh
say
my
probably
God.
increase the anticipation and incredibly. Yeah, that's a great idea actually.
Yeah. So, but like yeah, so like this, like just the pictures are just so dramatic, and like honestly, like it's the landscape too. It's like, you know, it's not only just his reaction, but like it's just like where they're at looks insane.
Incredible.
It just looks so dope.
So she put down the umbrella. Again, for those of you just listening, she puts down the umbrella and she's walking closer to him, and he turns around and go to the next shot. I think it's the next shot. Yeah, right there. Like you can see where he's just like, he's let his arms down, his head's kind of cocked to the side, and he's just absolutely in awe of his bride. It's a really neat shot.
Yeah. And then that's what you're trying to go for, you know, like you're trying to get that reaction, because like it makes really good photos. It tells like a really cool story of like, you know, like this is what he felt in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been, and I don't know if are you getting ready to pull up a couple more?
I think. Do you mind?
No, please. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah,
and again, for those of you that are just listening to this, make sure that you go to, easiest thing to just do is just go to YouTube, search Bokeh Podcast, or if you can just go to youtube.com/Bokeh Podcast, BOKEH Podcast. For those of you that are listening to the audio version, you can see the replay of this and get to actually enjoy the visuals to go along with the conversation. And I think Sean's scrolling through and looking for some other images here to pull up for us.
Look at this one. Let me pull up a list. My wife and I were kind of going through these last night, and like I don't really go through my photos like that often, and like it's just kind of like imposter syndrome kind of stuff.
Sure,
but,
I get it. Yeah, if you can pull up even just a couple more, that would be awesome. And then for those of you listening in and viewing for that matter, make sure if you're not following Sean already, do that. I'm popping up here on screen. You can see it's at vows_and_peaks. And on Instagram, we'll link to that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com, and of course vowsandpeaks.com. And we'll jump over to Sean's screen here real quick and check out this thumbnail. Oh, another stunning background. So for those of you listening in, the groom is standing again back to the camera. He's standing on the edge of is it a lake or is it a pond?
It's a lake, yeah.
A lake, okay, with the mountains in the background. Absolutely stunning. Go ahead, Sean.
So this is like one of those spots too where like this is like the main focus was like all the way to the right of this spot, so we just kind of like came around to the left hand side and found like this whole open spot. But like this spot was like super sick. You got like, it was a kind of a hazy day, so like the sun was kind of diffused with like just like some of the smoke, but like Halo like started coming down this thing, and like she just looked hella sick, and I was like, dude, like just like these photos are so dope because like it's like she's in this sick ass wedding dress in this crazy landscape, and she looks so tight, like
beautifully backlit with the sun as it's setting too, or is that rising?
Yeah, it's rising. It's rising.
Okay, cool.
And so like, you know, sometimes like I'll kind of like have people stop and I'll run around the other side too, just to kind of get like these different kind of angles. But then like here's like the full sequence of like, you know, this where she's kind of walking down. And I come like a little closer, so like, you know, now I'm like getting like a little more vertical too.
Yeah, and so for those of you listening too, the bride kind of walked down a rocky hill, if you will, with the sunrise in the background, stunning. And now she's getting closer to the groom. So the shots right now are from the back. You see the back of the bride, back of the groom, and Sean has positioned himself in such a way that you can see both of them. And as he's getting ready to photograph the groom when he turns around.
Yeah, and like so you can kind of see her starting to work her way up to the right, like right here. So like again, it's like putting the person on like either side versus directly behind them. But one of the things I really liked about this first look was like the lighting at that point was like really kind of hitting this foreground really nice. So like they were lit up like super nicely too. Like as you can see, like their whole backside is lit up with light.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, and she reaches out. I mean, when I see these pictures, Sean, I don't get the sense that this is contrived, and that was just my concern as you're describing. I mean, you're very intentional in the way that you're approaching capturing these images, and my only apprehension about that would be, man, I don't want it to feel contrived. And I started to tell this story earlier. Yeah, these are just beautiful. Again, for those of you listening in, can't see the live stream, make sure you go to Bokeh Podcast or youtube.com/Bokeh Podcast and you can see the replay. But what I was going to say earlier, Sean, is that when I've gone to photograph weddings before, while I'm trying to take a more photojournalistic approach, something that I've noticed is that videographers, after we finish photographing the still photos, videographers would step in, and I start to see them guiding and arranging and essentially producing the shot to such a great extent that you no longer have, like, they'll tell them, oh, hey, actually, can you put that, oh no, take the jacket back off, put it back on for us. Oh no, can you loosen that tie so you can tighten it back on? I want to get another shot. And now we're in a production facility instead of photographing a wedding day as it unfolds. And to me, that's such a turnoff, right? So there's this weird fine line. I know it's going to vary from couple to couple, photographer to photographer. There's a fine line between the production for the sake of, as you talked about earlier, this end product that the couple may not have full realization of what it takes to get there. But the fine line between the production and then letting things just kind of unfold as they are, and what you're showing on screen here, these images definitely look natural, and they're certainly beautiful. And I think it's a really great balance of kind of both sides of the coin.
Yeah, and honestly, I would say like doing the first look really helps like kind of foster the rest of the day, because kind of what I was going back to earlier about like the anticipation kind of building up to this point, it really is. And so like, at that point, like the nerves are kind of gone. Like, like people are just kind of ready to like kind of like just let loose and have a good time. And so I feel like people's guards are like down like quite a bit more than they would be otherwise.
That totally makes sense. Well, this is, we've run a little bit, well, I guess we're doing okay on time, but this has been such a great summation and certainly a little bit of a different approach too. I love the fact that you actually had some images to share. I really, really appreciate it. But this has been just such a good kind of practical thought process behind approaching a first look, Sean. And I really appreciate you making time to do this for the show. Just remind our listeners too, if you will, I know I've mentioned it throughout, but where they can find and follow you online and learn a little bit more about what you're doing.
So vowsandpeaks.com is my website, and then vows_and_peaks is my Instagram account.
Cool. Yeah, and I've got that pulled up on screen here, or I popped it up there on the screen, I should say. And I'll go ahead and just jump right back over to your Instagram here just to highlight this again, because your work is absolutely stunning. Again, as he mentioned, Sean mentioned, vows_and_peaks on Instagram. We'll link to that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. Go to vowsandpeaks.com to see Sean's website, but then make sure that you also, and we'll link to this in the show notes, but go to Sean's landing page for the best places to elope in Colorado. And if you want that, the full URL is vowsandpeaks.com/best place to elope Colorado with dashes in between each of those words. But Sean, really, really appreciate your time. Appreciate your perspective. Yeah. Good food for thought. For those of you listening in, make sure to reach out to Sean and give him props as well for his work. And thank you all so much for listening in. Thanks again, Sean.